A world without pain. The revolutionary invention of anesthesia. Throughout this documentary, I will prove my thesis. The invention of anesthesia on October 16, 1846, by William T.G. Morton, revolutionized medicine by making surgery painless. Although it was met with some skepticism, it led to a plethora of reforms, like more complex, safer forms of anesthesia. Before the invention of ether as an anesthetic agent, there were many other techniques to try to alleviate the pain of surgery, but none of them were very dependable or safe. Ancient Egyptian carvings dated back to 2500 BC showed them using pressure on a patient's arm or leg as a form of local anesthesia, like the way that if you put pressure on your limbs, they fall asleep. Peruvian Incas would also produce anesthesia by chewing cocoa leaves while letting the saliva fall on the wound to help alleviate the pain while performing surgery in the mid-16th century. However, by the 1800s, surgery was still a very dangerous process where patients could feel the excruciating pain of getting cut into, and thus surgeons would have to be very quick and could not do major surgeries. This started to change in 1844 when Horace Wells, a dentist from Hartford, Connecticut, noticed how nitrous oxide, also known as laughing gas, made a man feel no pain from an injury while under the effects of it, so he began experimenting with it. First, he arranged to have his own wisdom tooth taken out, a normally very painful surgery. But just before, he inhaled a bag of nitrous oxide. After the surgery, he confirmed that he had felt no pain. Finally, in January 1845, after a few more experiments on patients, his former partner, William T.G. Morton, introduced him to John Collins Warren, the head of the surgery department of Massachusetts General Hospital. Warren arranged for Wells to present his findings to a group of Harvard medical students. On the day of the presentation, Wells had one of Warren's students inhale nitrous oxide and have his tooth removed. Everything was going well at first, as he seemed to feel nothing. But a few minutes after starting, the student started groaning, and the crowd turned on Wells and denounced him as a humbug. After seeing his former partner fail in his demonstration less than a year ago, William T.G. Morton knew that continuing to experiment with nitrous oxide would not help him in his quest to revolutionize surgery. So he thought back to a lecture he had taken a year earlier at Harvard on how sulfuric ether could make a person unconscious and decided to pursue it. He would buy bottles of it from his chemist and began observing the impact of inhaling its fumes on himself and on many pets. What he found was that it made them unconscious and also immune to pain. When he was eventually satisfied with his experiments, he would use ether on his dental clients. He would also importantly create a mask to control the amount of ether that was inhaled, unlike Wells. This made it much more reliable, and he arranged once more with John Collins Warren to show his findings in a surgical amphitheater in the Massachusetts General Hospital. Finally, on the day of October 16, 1846, William T.G. Morton administered ether to patient Glenn Abbott as John Warren removed the tumor on the side of his neck. As the surgery went on, Abbott stayed completely unconscious and seemed to feel no pain. Finally, the surgery ended and Abbott woke up feeling no pain, and Morton dramatically proclaimed, "Gentlemen, this is no humbug." This was the first ever successful public demonstration of anesthesia, and it revolutionized surgery, making it pain-free. The amphitheater that Morton used during that surgery is now known as the Ether Dome and is a National Historic Site. However, Crawford Long, a practitioner from rural Georgia, claimed to have used ether on a patient as early as March 30th, 1842, a whole 4 years before Morton's demonstration. However, he never published his findings, so he did not get the same amount of recognition as Morton. After a major discovery like this, Most people were optimistic about the idea of surgery without pain. However, there were two other major reactions to the use of ether in the first few decades of anesthesia. The first reaction was the invention of chloroform, created by Scottish obstetrician James Young Simpson in reaction to the success of ether. Chloroform was much safer than ether as it worked quicker and was less flammable. In reaction to this discovery, during the Civil War, the US Army started issuing chloroform instead of ether despite both being readily available. Soon after this, most of the world switched from ether to chloroform. The second reaction was related to the use of anesthesia during childbirth to minimize the pain of labor, which was the most common use of chloroform. Some groups, most famously the Church, opposed this use of chloroform. The Calvinist Church of Scotland reacted to it by saying that God had punished the descendants of Eve by making childbirth cause pain, and that using chloroform during childbirth was going against the Lord's word. The opposition only grew stronger after Hannah Greener, a young girl, died from the misuse of chloroform during surgery. However, this resistance all but disappeared after Queen Victoria used chloroform during the birth of Prince Leopold and praised it, making it much more accepted. To take us through the further advancements and reforms in anesthesia, I was fortunate to be able to interview Dr. Anjali Alapalli, Associate Professor of Anesthesiology in St. John's Medical College, on 3 separate occasions. My first question is, how does anesthesia actually work?
So, this is a very basic explanation of how anesthesia works. The primary action is on your brain and your nervous system. So, it acts on receptors in your central nervous system, so essentially in parts of your brain, where it slows down communication between the brain cells or between the synapses. And so you lose awareness of what is happening, which is the amnesia part. You also cannot move during anesthesia, otherwise a surgery is not possible. So you need muscle relaxation, and it happens in the muscles of your entire body, and it acts on those receptors and blocks them. So all these together is how anesthesia works.
My next question is, what have the different anesthetic agents been since ether and chloroform?
So ether and chloroform were revolutionary in their time because they were single anesthetic agents. Right now we have a combination, and the current drugs that are used are inhaled gases, which is like isoflurane, sevoflurane, and desflurane. Anesthesia machines are now called anesthesia workstations, and they are almost space age. You can not only monitor people during surgery, you can even predict any intraoperative event. You can even check the gas in the anesthetic gas in the lungs, like how much is present in the lungs. All of this has evolved slowly over time, and the from the first machines, which is the Boyle's machines, which is something I've used as well. But all the safety features that existed in the Boyle's machine, safety features are essential to make sure that the wrong gas is not delivered or the oxygen doesn't fail during surgery. And there are many others. All of those safety features from the Boyle's machine have just been upgraded, but actually remain the same from then till now, which is quite a remarkable feature.
In conclusion, the invention of anesthesia completely revolutionized medicine. Before anesthesia, surgeries had to be quick so patients wouldn't die from pain or shock. After Morton's invention, however, surgeries could be longer and surgeons would not have to worry about rushing the surgery and could be more precise. The invention also led to reactions like the creation of chloroform and the church opposing it. Finally, it led to reforms such as newer anesthetic drugs like the fluorines and machines like the anesthetic workstation, creating a safer and more effective way to deliver anesthesia. As a result, anesthesia has saved millions of lives by making complex surgeries possible, making it one of, if not the most important medical revolutions ever.